Happy New Year. It's 2023. I feel like everybody says it, but God, I hope this year is so much better than last year. No, I mean, like, things are getting better, right? I think, like, you know, by a lot of accounts, you know, obviously 2020 sucked, like really sucked. It was bad, right? It's objectively bad. For a lot of people, 2021 was even worse, right? 2022, I think, looking at it objectively, not as bad as the previous 2 years, still not great. A lot of things that sucked about it, but maybe we've gotten it all out of our system now, and 2023 will just have its normal level of sucky things that happened instead of all of this extra stuff, right? We can hope. Anyway, this week, though, on the show, we are doing the second edition of our Weird Fun Bag series. Last month, first episode of December, I said we're going to start doing this. Typically, the first episode of every month is just going to be this random assortment of stories that just didn't really fit in any other kind of, broader category. And so this week, 3 stories for you. We're going to learn about Oofty Goofty, the Kentucky meat shower, and the exploding trousers. It's just like, I'm telling you, it's random. And I don't want to give any of it away off the start because I think the titles do a great job of teasing just what these are about, except they don't tell you anything, but just, God, so weird, right? Well, let's get into it. Story time. Leonard Borchardt was born in Berlin, Germany on April 26, 1862. And because he was Jewish, he quickly realized that he needed to leave Germany as fast as possible, and he sneaked onto the SS Fresia at age 14. When the captain found him, because he wasn't supposed to be there, he made Leonard work on 3 transatlantic trips to pay for his ticket on the first trip, which seems weird, before letting him off in 1878. And so if you're doing the math on that, he basically had to work on these ships for 2 years. Yeah, because at age 14, it would have been 1876. So, like, he jumps on this boat to escape Germany, and what normally would have taken a couple of months, I think, or a few weeks, ended up taking him 2 years because this captain made him work on this boat. And once he got off, Leonard wandered through various cities in the United States before winding up homeless in Detroit, also just known as living in Detroit. Hey, woo! Hey, that's an easy jab to take at Detroit. That's not fair. And figuring that it couldn't get any worse than that, he then joined the army. But of course it was going to get worse. Leonard was only 5'4" with dark hair and darker colored skin. And because of that, soldiers gave him a really hard time. They also told him that he was going to be the first man that would be scalped by any Native American because he was Jewish. And like, I was reading that sentence and a lot of that just didn't make sense. But then I realized, like, oh, this is the 1880s. The United States Army, that's who they're fighting right now, is the Native Americans. And apparently Native Americans hate Jewish people too. Who knew? When Leonard's first order deployed him to the Washington Territory, a place full of Jew-hating natives. Not really. Leonard decided to desert the army. The following year, he resurfaced in San Francisco working as Oofty Goofty, quote, the wild man of Borneo, in this sideshow act on Market Street. And what he would do is he would cover himself from head to toe in tar and then plaster horsehair all over himself. And so, he's this little tiny Jewish man who's covered his entire body in black tar and then rolled around or plastered a bunch of horsehair on him, which I hope he didn't have allergies, because that sounds like a nightmare. The attendant at the show locked him in a cage and would charge 10 cents for people to just come and look at this person. The attendant would then stuff chunks of raw meat into the cage, and Leonard would just like rattle the bars and screech because he's this crazy, kind of racist stereotyping thing, of the Southeast Asian country. That act lasted for about a week before Leonard got very sick, either because the tar closed up his pores, which prevented him from sweating, or because he ate a ton of raw meat. Who knows? Probably both. It took 4 days for doctors to remove all of the tar that had just cemented itself to his body. And they were really only able to do so when they doused him in this solvent and then laid him on the roof of the hospital to dry off. Leonard then tried to revive his Oofty Goofty character by working as the mascot for a baseball team. You know, the famous San Francisco racist Asians. Oh man, that would be a great. And look, San Francisco has a big Asian population, so I don't know, instead of the San Francisco Giants, just the San Francisco racist Asians, which that doesn't even make sense because that implies that the Asians themselves are racist when that's not what we're talking about here. It's more just the San Francisco racists. And I am fighting every fiber of my being to not do like some weird Asian accent with baseball. It's mostly because I can't think of anything to say. So we'll move on. After the San Francisco racists lost several games with Leonard as their mascot, they blamed him for the bad luck and kicked him off the bus, forcing him to walk several hundred miles back to San Francisco. After claiming that a man offered him $200 to burn his house down, Leonard was placed in the home of the inebriates and examined by the San Francisco Insanity Commissioners, which, that's a lot to unpack there, right? So like he burns this house down, obviously gets caught for it. And then he's like, nah, man, this dude paid me $200 to do it because insurance or whatever. I'm not crazy. And then they throw him in the home of the inebriates. And there was an insanity commission in San Francisco. All of that just sounds so insane to me because of just how woke San Francisco is. So I don't know. During his examination, though, they found out that he had deserted the military, and then they threw him in jail for 3 years because you're not supposed to do that. After he was released on July 14th, 1886, Leonard decided to break a world record by going across the United States in a wheelbarrow. He gave up after 1 day because a group of farmers knocked him off the road and into a creek, which is just funny to me. I don't know. He's trying to Forrest Gump himself across the country in a wheelbarrow, and then these farmers were just like, nah, thwomp, and then just, not even barely out of San Francisco at that point, and then he just gets assaulted into a creek. He tried to relocate to nearby Sacramento, which is about 2 hours away, but then he was immediately kicked out by the governor of California. After attempting to gain fame as a long-distance walker and an actor, Leonard finally stumbled on his best idea yet, right? After being tossed out of a saloon onto the cobblestone street in San Francisco's red light district, Leonard realized that he could not feel pain. And I don't know why it took him this long to figure it out, right? Because if you remember, he had to have chemical solvents put on his body to have tar removed from his skin. They probably had to peel it off. That hurts. He got knocked out of a wheelbarrow and fell down into a creek where there's rocks and stuff. That would hurt. And so now he gets punched out into the street. And that's when he realized, like, none of this hurt. And so he began walking around the streets of San Francisco, charging people 5 cents for the 5 cents if they wanted to kick him, 15 cents for them to hit him with a cane, or 25 cents to beat him with a baseball bat. And everyone was totally on board with this because why not? I would love to pay 25 cents to just take a swing at some mentally unstable person's face. That sounds like a great time to me, right? Maybe not to the face, maybe like to the kidney or something. I don't know. In 1891, professional boxer John Sullivan hit Leonard across the back with a pool cue, and that actually broke 3 of his vertebrae, and Leonard allegedly didn't feel any of it, which that's nuts. A pool cue, I mean, look, still pretty hefty, but for a pool cue to break 3 of your vertebrae, that's a hard hit. And it was a professional boxer, so obviously he was pretty strong. But the following year, Leonard was living in Montana, where he told the gullible locals that he was partially petrified and was unable to feel pain after submerging himself in water for several years. He even bet people $50 that he would not cry out in pain if someone hit him with a drill. And by the end of the decade, he had moved to Houston, where he sold imitation diamonds and continued to let people try to hurt him for money. His last appearance on the historical record was a 1923 phone book listing. So we don't know what happened to him. As most of these stories go, he probably died when someone beat him to death for money accidentally, but we actually just don't know. Our next story here is of the Kentucky meat shower. Now, going to take a little bit different direction, all right? Because this is just fun, all right? So the Kentucky meat shower is this special sex position, all right, where a man and a woman, all right, they step into a bathtub / shower together, right? And while they're doing it, all right, the man takes a giant meat cleaver and begins slicing off portions of a cured ham that he has hung from the shower head. All right. Are you following along here? All right. So once the man has like a good handful of meat, he then tosses the meat into the air. Kind of like how LeBron James tosses the chalk before every game. They just whoosh up into the air. Some of it may get stuck on the ceiling because usually bathtubs, they have pretty low ceiling, but he tosses up into the air. And then the woman, while she's like bent over and they're doing it, all right, she then tries to catch each piece of meat with her mouth. It's just insane, all right? And any piece that then hits the shower floor is put into a sandwich and then served to the children, all right? No, that's not at all. I'm mentally ill, all right, because I made all of that up. That's not at all what the Kentucky meat shower is. That was just fun for me to go down that rabbit hole. And I'm sorry that if you have children in the car right now, you've got a lot of explaining to do. And I'm sorry for that. But instead, the real story happened on March 3rd, 1876, when a woman named Mrs. Crouch was making soap in her front yard in Kentucky. It was just a bright sunny day. There was a slight breeze. It was just a really pleasant spring afternoon. And then Mrs. Crouch heard a loud snap and saw a piece of meat lying on the ground right next to her, just like a chewed up, just mushy piece of meat, right? And then a moment later, another plop and another piece of meat appeared next to her. And for the next few minutes, Mrs. Crouch and her husband watched as these huge chunks of meat fell from the sky and just hit the ground with just that wet thwack, just, Other lighter pieces of meat around them were just kind of fluttering down like little beefy snowflakes. And then, as mysteriously as it started, the shower ended. But word quickly spread, because what else are you going to talk about in Kentucky? Neighbors and people from all over the county came to look at this 300-foot long, 150-foot wide swath of meat that had been scattered over the Crouch's farm. They just from the air. right? And along with the mysterious source of the shower, no one could actually figure out what kind of meat that it actually was. A lot of people thought it was beef. One hunter said it was bear meat. Okay. Two men just picked pieces up off the ground and ate it, and they said it was mutton. Several samples were sent off to laboratories for testing, but even the scientists who studied the samples could figure out what kind of animal it came from. They had no idea. The best that they could do was verify that it was, in fact, from an animal and not from like a person, which I guess is like kind of good. That would be even crazier if it was just like a person, just like a chopped up person falling from the sky. Without an actual scientific answer, though, people were left to speculate as to what was actually going on. While most people just assumed that, these dirtfoot hillbillies in Kentucky were hacking each other to death and then just launching their carcasses into the sky like some weird horror movie catapult, which that's actually kind of a fun premise, right? Like your horror movie villain, all right, like Jigsaw from Saw or whatever, he's chopping up all these people. And then, because he's a maniac, he's loading all of these chopped up people pieces into this catapult and just flinging it out into the neighborhood. That would be a fun serial killer, though, right? He just wheels around like a little slingshot or a little catapult around with him, and every time he kills somebody and chops them up, then he just launches their body parts into the neighbor's yard. I don't know where my mind is today. Let's see, where are we? The Crouches, however, and chemist Robert Peter actually ended up producing like the most logical explanation for what actually happened, and it's not really that exciting. They came to believe that basically this passing flock of vultures who had just finished devouring some sort of carcass, or a deer or whatever, pretty much vomited up the meat as they flew by, because birds like this, vultures and stuff, they tend to eat more than their stomach can realistically consume. And then when one bird begins to purge and throw up, all of the other birds in the flock get that sympathy nausea, how people can get. And they all started, throwing up at the sight of the first bird throwing up. And then that just resulted in the shower of half-digested meat. That's what people assume. We still don't know. We still don't know what happened. So our final story here is of the exploding trousers. And this is not this is probably the one where you might think it's sex related. It's not. It all began in the 19th century when ragwort, which looks like this kind of tall mutant dandelion, arrived in New Zealand with European settlers. It was not a native species to New Zealand, but it is very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very invasive. But although sheep and goats, of which there are plenty in New Zealand, can eat this weed without any issues, ragwort is actually very poisonous to horses and cows, which in New Zealand, a little bit more in demand, a little bit more important. And by 1930, the ragwort had gotten way out of control. And as dairy farming increased in New Zealand in the 20th century, many farmers began losing what little land they had to ragwort, which was then threatening their horses and their cows, because they didn't know it was poisonous to them. They're just eating everything. So they pleaded to, these New Zealand farmers pleaded to the Department of Agriculture for a solution, who offered sodium chlorate, which is a pretty standard herbicide. And the only evidence, though, that the government had that suggested that sodium chlorate was a viable solution was a promotional article they had seen in a magazine that praised the chemical as the best way to kill ragwort that had ever been invented. So they really didn't do much research. They're just like, oh yeah, here's this fun ad that I saw in Farmers Weekly whatever. And let's try this. So Richard Buckley, who was one of those concerned farmers, snatched up all of the sodium chlorate that he could get his hands on and began spraying every square inch of infested farmland that he had. And after a long day of weed killing, Buckley pulled off his pants, as they did, and hung them in front of his fireplace to dry. And then a few moments later, his pants just exploded inside of his house. He quickly ran over because his pants were on fire. I've been watching. I'm going to derail the show again. I have been watching the new Beavis and Butthead episodes on, I think, Paramount Plus. And now for some reason, I just walk around the house just imitating Beavis, because like, if you don't know Beavis, he has like this, he's a power maniac. He has this fascination with fire. And so just anytime I see the word fire, that's the only thing I hear is fire, like Beavis. It just sounds like, anyway, it's beside the point. Buckley, his pants exploded. They're on fire in his living room. He throws them outside before they end up burning the whole house down. And he then watched for the next several minutes as smaller little mini explosions erupted from the crotchial region of what used to be his pants. And when word of Buckley's experience got out, more farmers actually came forward with their own stories of their pants exploding. One man was riding on his horse when the friction caused the chemical, which, by the way, is highly flammable under dry conditions, to then react and catch fire. Several farmers in New Zealand actually reportedly died when their pants exploded on their person, which is insane. That's got to be, just a farmer walking. Oh yeah, gonna go over there, feed my sheep. Gonna go spray this rag wart there, and then blam, just his pants explode, which then just rips off his entire bottom half of his body, or at least blows his dick off for sure, right? And like that's one of the last things you would ever expect happening to you, because like clothes, although they can catch fire, they need like exposure to an open flame in order to do that. So if you're not anywhere near fire, then I've lost my mind today. But if you're not anywhere near like an open flame, you don't expect your clothes to then catch fire. And so I'm totally sober right now. That's what's crazy. But so, yeah, these people just randomly, their pants were exploding. And after a few months of these exploding pants, farmers gave up. They're not taking the risk, which I don't know, maybe like just put on an apron or something, or like change the way you spray it so the chemical's not getting on your pants. It's not hard. The ragwort flea beetle and the cinnabar moth were actually then brought over from Europe and introduced to the area to help control the weeds. But it hasn't really been the same. Like ragwort continues to be a problem in New Zealand today because people just, I don't know, they didn't want their pants to explode. So yeah, there you go. Weird fun bag number 2. I think that's just a fun way to start the year, right? We had some fun on this one. At least I did. Some of you are probably very concerned for my mental well-being right now, and that's totally justified. I get that. Other than that, though, let's see what we learned today. What did we learn? Number 1, Oofty Goofty, Leonard Borchardt, a small, tiny Jewish man who was persecuted for his ethnicity, turned around and was equally as racist to other subcultures. It's just ironic. But apparently couldn't feel pain and just allowed people to pay him to just beat the hell out of him, which that's odd behavior, right? Number 2, the Kentucky meat shower. Not a sex position. I mean, it might be. You can make up the Kentucky meat shower if you want. But no, just a strange occurrence of chewed up pieces of meat falling from the sky in Kentucky. Probably was just like a flock of buzzards or vultures who just sympathy gagged all over the countryside after they devoured some sort of carcass. And then number 3, in the 1930s, New Zealand farmers legitimately were dealing with their pants exploding because of sodium chloride, just a highly flammable chemical, just needs a little bit of heat to react, and maybe a little bit. I don't know if it's water, maybe water. Sodium and water react, with like sweat or something. Probably that's gross. Ball sweat and friction, and then sodium chlorate, and then your dick gets blown off. Sounds like a bad day. Next week on Our Weird World, we get back to the regular history, and this is going to be kind of a sad episode. We are going to look at some lesser known school shootings and school disasters. Look, because here's the thing. As I record this, there's probably a school shooting happening right now, and I think it's easy to get caught up in the fact that like school shootings are kind of like this new thing. It's not, actually. People have been dying in schools for a very long time. And so we'll look at some lesser known school disasters. We're going to look at the Bath school disaster. We're going to look at the story of Walter Seifert, a story from Cokeville Elementary School, and the Beslan school siege. It is what it is. So get ready for that next week. Other than that, thank you for listening. Keep telling all of your friends and keep it weird. My girlfriend's a dick magnet. My girlfriend gotta have it. She's hot, can't stop, up on stage doing shots. Tip the man, he'll ring the bell. Get her drunk, she'll scream like hell. Dirty girl, getting down, dance with guys from out of town. No one really knows if she's drunk or if she's stoned, but she's coming back to my place tonight. Red thong, party's on, love this song, sing along, come together, leave alone, see you later, back at home. She likes to shake her ass, she grinds it to the beat. She likes to pull my hair when I make her grind her teeth. I like to strip her down, she's naughty to the end. You know what she is? No doubt about it. She's a bad, bad girlfriend.